You've been working hard, working at your previous careers, working in the finance industry. Maybe you're coming in from university and you're studying. You want to work in finance, want to get a top job, move into a top job. And then all of a sudden you find out that this thing called DEI is quite biased against you and your career opportunities because you're a man, maybe because you're Asian, or you're white, or you're straight. All of a sudden, all these major finance firms, they're not focused on whether you're a highly skilled, competent employee. They care about whether you're part of a particular part, whether you're a woman, whether you're part of the rainbow community, whether you're part of certain other political agendas. And that's a very difficult reality to deal with. And in this video, we're going to discuss this in more detail. So before we move on to finance, let's look at Baltimore and the bridge collapse there, right? Which was effectively a issue that occurred due to reasons we don't fully know, right? There's lots of theories out there. Was the ship remotely controlled due to some kind of conflict with another country, and the country hacked into the ship and caused it to crash into the bridge? Was it due to a lack of training of the shipping staff? Was it just a freak accident? What happened there? Was it a power issue? Now, if we look into this in detail in terms of the local news, you can see in the area I've highlighted red here, they say it could be potentially a power issue. Now, yeah, it could be a power issue, but we don't actually know that for certain, effectively, right? We don't know whether it actually was a power issue. And if it wasn't a power issue, right? If it was caused by, say, a lack of training due to hiring people on the basis of DEI, on the basis of their diversity, their equity and inclusion initiatives at the company that runs this particular shipping vessel, we'll never know, effectively, right? Because we're not allowed to question it. So if they had hired maybe people, like I say, from particular racial or gender demographic, they were poorly trained, but they met the quota of being a woman or being from a particular ethnic minority, we're not allowed to question that. And that could be the reason why you have these type of freak accidents in the West, which is meant to be a developed civilization, right? A developed country like America is not meant to have like freak accidents where you have a massive shipping container going to a massive bridge without being stopped first. It's completely crazy, right? Now, I'm not saying this is definitely caused by DEI, but it could be a potential issue. But the fact you're not even allowed to question it is what's something I'll explain next, right? And next, you can see in this particular article I have on the screen right now is that this particular lawmaker who's saying that perhaps it was caused by DEI is being portrayed in a negative way. If we scroll down a bit further in this article, what we can see is that effectively it's saying that right-wing activism is the cause of blaming DEI, and it's a right-wing conspiracy theory to effectively criticize DEI, which is a bit of a weird concept to say that you're not allowed to question DEI whatsoever, otherwise you're going to get labeled a right-wing conspiracy theorist, right? If we look at the next article here, what can we see? We have a major financial business publication, right, which in America called Fortune. It's a smaller version of, you can say, Forbes, Inc., all these Money Inc., all these type of stereotypical business publications in America, right? So what they're trying to do here is to make it seem like if you complain about DEI, you're like a fringe, far-right conspiracy theorist, other words that I won't say here. And it's showing how corporate America is struggling to deal with this, or how should they deal with this. Now, it's a bit of a weird scenario where it's like you're not allowed to question anything, otherwise you could be effectively putting your job at risk. You could be working in a corporate company, a Fortune 500 company, major financial firm. You question DEI, you question that, and it really impacts your career. And this is how they're framing this. Like, oh, if you question it, well, maybe you're not living up to our company corporate values, even though there is a legitimate grievance here, right? That if you hire people on the basis of race or gender, to meet some imaginary race or gender quota, to meet equality requirements, you're not hiring the best. You're not necessarily hiring people on the basis of meritocracy. You're not creating a a competency-based hierarchy, right? You're putting people in senior positions who don't know what they're doing. You see this all throughout the US government. You see this all throughout, many avenues of government entities. The inefficiency that comes when you're just focusing on hiring people on the basis of their race or gender, right? That's why you see complete inefficiencies occur, complete disasters occur. It is part of the reason. It's not the only reason, but it's part of the reason, right? And in the example I mentioned earlier, when it came to this bridge collapse, right? One of the theories out there is that maybe they were hiring people from an ethnic minority. In this case, some of the suggestive theories out there is that it could be Indian, and I'm ethnically Indian, right? I'm not personally offended by that, but I do think that, if they did hire people on the basis of, they're ethnic minorities instead of they're qualified to do the job, then, don't be surprised when these disasters occur, because you prioritized equality and diversity over competency and meritocracy, right? So how the right uses the boogeyman of DEI, right? So to upend civil rights law, right? Now, in order to run an efficient company, you need to focus on efficiency, productivity, profit-driven, motive, hire the best people on the basis of their competency and meritocracy, as I say. And in order for that system to function, or society to function, you can have equality of opportunity, but not equality of outcome, right? So everyone should have the same opportunity to apply for the same jobs and reach a senior level. But you can't say, okay, well, we need equal outcome. Well, because we have 50% and 50% women and men in the country, you need 50% women and men in a management role. It doesn't make any sense. I mean, several women will prefer to have kids and leave the career and leave major finance companies or any other major industry to have their kids. They're not going to be working full time non-stop, right? So, I mean, and that's part of the reason why there's less women in senior management. We can't blame that on some kind of right-wing conspiracy theory, right? But that's what they're trying to do in this narrative. We're not going to go through this in detail, but you can see the word they use here, right? Fighting disinformation. Now, what they're trying to say here is effectively, if you question this, if you question DEI, you're disinformation, misinformation, some kind of, as I say, right-wing conspiracy theory, crazy guy. So we can't question it. Now, if we move on, if you go on Google and you search for DEI in finance, or DEI in anything, to be fair, Google, like YouTube, like major companies online, they always have to parrot the narrative, whatever the narrative is, right? So in this case, the narrative is DEI is a good thing. We're not allowed to question it. You Google DEI in finance, it's always going to be positive things. You're hardly ever going to see anything negative about it, apart from the odd article that will question DEI. Now, that's as you can see all of this here. Now, if you go to the FCA website. Now, the FCA is a UK financial regulator. In America, you have the SEC, the CFTC, FINRA, things like that. Every country has its own financial regulator. In this case, what they're saying is essentially that diversity and inclusion is a good thing. And not only is it a good thing, we're going to investigate companies and financial firms to make sure they're pushing for diversity. Not that they're pushing for meritocracy, not that they're pushing for competency, not that they're pushing for higher levels of skills and training for their staff, not for they're pushing for higher levels of productivity. We're pushing for higher levels of diversity. We need more women in senior management. We need more of this group or that ethnic group in senior management. We need more people who support the rainbow community or part of that community in senior management. Why? Because they're more competent? Because of their meritocracy? Because of their skills? No, they have the right ideology that we want. And that's what you realize. We don't have a competency-based hierarchy. We have an ideology-based hierarchy, right? In the West, in major Western corporations. And this is an example of that, right? Why would a financial regulator that is focused on making sure that financial firms follow the rules, understand what they're doing, explain things clear to their clients, don't take advantage of their clients, don't crash the financial economy, don't do credit card fraud, don't do any type of illegal activity and things like that? Why would a financial regulator be so obsessed with diversity and inclusion? They should just say, hire the best people, get the job done, and make sure, do your best to not negative impact financial markets. Why is there not a focus on financial innovation, or saying that, you know what, we need to train all the financial people in the industry on crypto? You need to complete a crypto qualification to work in finance, because that's where the industry is heading. You need to learn how algo trading works. You need to understand how peer-to-peer lending works. You need to understand basic coding, because coding and technology is becoming increasingly merged and disrupting the finance industry. You need to understand how to engage in AI and how AI can impact finance. Why is there not a focus on that? And let's keep going. So we've got this whole consultation, this whole new initiative where they're going to go into regulated financial companies, check how much diversity there is. And bear in mind, a lot of these initiatives, even though myself, I am from an ethnic minority background, I'm ethnically Indian, a lot of these initiatives don't actually benefit me, because I'm not considered one of the oppressed minorities. If you're Asian or white or a man or straight, you're not one of the chosen demographics who are going to get the benefit of this diversity drive. I mean, on what basis are we meant to support an initiative that is increasingly rigged against us? I don't know what they're thinking. I don't know, do they think everyone's just going to go along with this? Or just, you know, what this system is doing at a macro level, not just with DEI, but with culture in general, is trying to demoralize and emasculate men, not only in their workplace, in their home life. Anyone who doesn't parrot the liberal feminist narrative, whatever that narrative is, anything that falls under the scope of liberal or feminism, they're not going to prioritize you as a demographic, right? Now, what you can see here is they have a UK woman in finance charter. There's no UK men in finance charter. Unless there is, you can let me know in the comments. There's no real initiative to help men, but there's never-ending resources. The money gets printed out of thin air, comes out of nowhere. There's a woman empowerment network. There's a hiring more women initiative, promoting more women initiative. How's that benefiting me? And then if you don't support it, then you're a bad person as a man. So let's go through this in a bit of detail. There we go. So, okay, sure. So this, I've worked at this company, and I'm not gonna, due to legal reasons, you're not allowed to comment on certain things about the company you work for. So we'll just look at what's publicly available. Okay? Not gonna comment on my experience working there, just what's publicly available. Claire Woodman, so she's the CEO of Morgan Stanley International and head of EMEA. So she's extremely senior in the company, right? Okay, let's move on. So she's basically saying we've got these specific progress highlights. This is the progress they've made, right? This is such a high priority for them. The high priority isn't really, this is a bigger priority. If you work for any financial firm, again, I'm not going to focus on my experience at Morgan Stanley, they are more focused on pushing liberalism, pushing feminism, pushing the woke ideology, supporting mass migration, pushing ESG, pushing climate change agendas, carbon tax credits, all the stuff like that, then they are focused on making a profit. Making a profit is a secondary motive. Billion-dollar banks, billion-dollar industry, trillion-dollar industry, billion-dollar banks, billion-dollar hedge funds, billion-dollar private equity firms, they're more focused on making money in the money industry, the finance industry. They're meant to be money obsessed, meant to be focused on getting Rolexes, getting a Benz, getting a Lamborghini, whatever the stereotype in your mind is, getting a tailored suit, getting a Tom Ford suit. They're more focused on pushing these agendas than they are focused on profit. And you're expected to go along with it. If you don't go along with it, if you just want to go to work and work hard and do your job and earn a lot of money, try to earn a lot of money, try to climb the corporate ladder, even though it's being rigged against you, even though they're saying that women should be given preferential treatment over you, even though you've been saying that, you know, you're a bad person if you're a man, even though there are countless, as I say, different workshops, exhibitions, networking groups, and everything to benefit women and not men. And if you point that out, you're the problem as a man. If you say there's a bias in favor of women, you're the problem as a man. If you come to work and you just want to do your job and work hard and progress on the basis of meritocracy and doing a good job, that's not really how it works. You're not one of the chosen demographics. You're not repeating the right agendas that we need you to repeat to progress. So you're going to be held back, held down, while you see complete wave bucket loads of other chosen demographics preferred. So if we go through this in a bit of detail, so Female membership on our main Morgan Stanley International Board stand at 39%. So they've already got 39% of women. There's no focus on putting Indians, if we're going to make it about race and gender, in positions of power, right? I'm ethnically Indian. Most finance firms, when they want to focus on hiring my demographic, they go on offshore and outsource their work to Mumbai in India to get people to do the work for a third or less than a third of the price, right, for their salary. So when it comes to my demographic, I'm not given preferential treatment in the UK like we can see here, which is the UK Women in Finance Charter for Morgan Stanley. Women are. They're not going to say, oh, we need to focus on putting Indian men in 39% in senior management roles. No, we need to focus on women. Oh, when you're going to focus on Indian people? When we hire them for cheap in India to do the work. Because they're actually doing the work in India. They're not, sitting in comfy air conditioning offices and doing chit-chatting and responding to a few emails and schmoozing with senior management and sucking up to senior management, as you often see from, let's just say, other demographics. I'll leave it at that. Okay, so we've got 39% women in Morgan Stanley senior management. 44%. Right, there's no 44% of Indian men, but it doesn't matter. We need to focus on women. They're the number one priority. Female representation overall increased to 40%. Okay. 40% of promotions were women. I'm sure 40% of promotions were not Indian men, but it doesn't matter. We need to focus on women. Remember that. Most important thing in the world, hiring, promoting, and elevating women. That's the highest priority. Not the profit agenda, not getting work done. Woman. We need to focus on equality, diversity, equity. Okay. Then we keep going. So then they have 54%. So that's over half in the summer analyst program. So, I mean, you've got more than 50%. Because if the agenda is equality, then why wouldn't you have 50% men, 50% women? You've got more than 50% of women in this. So I don't know how that fits into your equality narrative. But let's just keep going. So then they've got these other initiatives that they're sponsoring at schools. So we're not going to go into that in much detail, right? But we understand that they're doing never-ending things to benefit women, not benefit men, and definitely not benefit Indian men. And then I want to focus on this. Now, this is a great article, right? Now, I'd encourage you to go through this in detail if you do have the time, because what it does is it explains to you what is going on in terms of complex systems won't survive the competency crisis. Now, the competency crisis is what happens when you have a lack of competency, a lack of meritocracy, and what you end up with is essentially people who parrot the right agenda, but they're average, mediocre, and brainwashed. So they're not good at doing the job, but they fit the quota that you've set there. So, okay, I'm, in this example, I support all the right agendas, feminism, liberalism, rainbow flag, the jab, whatever the new initiative is, Ukraine, mass migration, whatever the next agenda is, right? You support all the right things, you parrot all the right talking points, the system slaps the finger at you and says, we need you to support veganism. I support veganism. That will help you in your career. That will help you in your career more than doing a good job. The person who does a good job, who's highly effective, will be disadvantaged for not parroting the right right talking points and basically compromising their basic freedom of having their own opinions. You can't see the West has become so warped with its ideology. It's effectively throwing competency and meritocracy alongside men and a whole bunch of other good things in the trash just to speed headfirst with its ideology, even if it's going into a brick wall, even if it's a sinking ship. You parrot the right ideology, it doesn't matter if the civilization's sinking, if the company's sinking. You're the right demographic, you're parroting the right agenda, which is more important than a successful, profitable company. So we're going to talk through some of the examples it gives here. Sure. So what it has here is it talks through some of the different disasters that have occurred in recent years, different pipelines collapsing. This article was written before. It was written in June 1st last year. So it was written before the bridge had collapsed. There are many different instances of trains getting derailed, chemicals getting spilled in East Palestine, Ohio, different, power lines collapsing, factories collapsing. I'm not saying all of these are due to DEI. But if you're focused, as I say, not on competency and meritocracy, you're focused on just putting people in positions of power on the basis of their race or gender, you're going to have these problems because they're not fit to do the work. Yeah, and this is a key section here, from meritocracy to diversity. So what it's trying to say here is that, if you prioritize diversity over meritocracy, it doesn't create a sustainable system. Now, in this example, which is about halfway through the article, it talks about hedge funds and hedge fund hiring, right? And it's saying, okay, so if you have a standard for hiring people within hedge funds who are investment bankers, former investment bankers who did top MBA programs, but then you want it to be more diverse, then you have to lower the standards a bit, right? Because maybe you don't have enough people of different genders and races in that top echelon of work, of former investment bankers and top MBA programs. So if you lower the bar and then you say, okay, well, maybe we can't get the diverse demographics we want to hire for our roles. So you have to relax the requirements for the sake of diversity. So you might say, okay, let's go for people who are less experienced. Let's go for undergraduates. Let's hire people who, are more of a diverse group rather than the best candidates. Now, if you have that type of scenario, then obviously your standards get lowered, your work ethic gets lowered, your work output quality gets lowered, because you're looking for less experienced people for more senior technical roles. This is common sense, but you can't even point this out in the finance industry, as I explained. Now, in this section, what it's saying, and again, you can go through this in detail yourself, I just want to focus on some of the key points. It's saying that MIT, which is a top university in America, to increase gender diversity, all it did was it was offering jobs to previously rejected female clients, right? Female candidates for job opportunities. So again, if you're just looking at diversity for the sake of diversity, you're going to have a lower quality of products, of employees, of your workforce. And you can see this throughout the finance industry, throughout many industries, and even when it comes to universities. Now, in this part of the article, what it's pointing out is that if diversity doesn't reach the standards that they require, they end up putting in some quite harsh requirements, right? And if we scroll up a bit, and you can see here, right? So in the case of Wells Fargo and also Goldman Sachs, what they said is we want to hire a specific proportion of, in Wells Fargo's case, people from the black community, and in a Goldman Sachs case, people who are not straight white men, right? To essentially be in senior roles or senior roles of companies they're working with. So not only are they impacting and pushing DEI on themselves, they're pushing DEIs on their client companies, the banks, the other banks they work with, the other companies that they invest or offer loans to, or help do IPOs. So again, it's rigged against straight white men. It's really rigged against straight men, period. But in this case, you can see they're focused on specific racial demographics. I've never seen any of these initiatives really benefit Indians or Asians, by the way. So all this DEI talk, it doesn't benefit straight white men or straight Asian men. And increasingly, you see a lot of black people in America, black men in America, also realizing this doesn't really benefit straight black men either. Further down in this article, it talks about how competency is declining from the core outwards, right? Now, this is the type of thing you need to typically consider how it's impacting your system. And you can see it day to day. Things are just lowering every day in terms of Western living standards. Again, you can see here it mentions the American system is cracking. Now, this is an important thing to note because earlier in the article, and I kind of skipped it, it talks about the air traffic control. Now, you see in America right now, there were a few scandals about just hiring people from diverse backgrounds for the sake of it. There were issues around, okay, if we're just hiring diverse pilots and diverse cabin crews, if they don't know what they're doing and DEI leads to planes crashing, then, I mean, how far are you going to push DEI and ignore the adverse effects of not hiring people on the basis of competency and meritocracy to the point where it could crash a plane and end lives? Here we've got James Damore. Now, you might remember a few years ago, this guy who was working at Google, again, a very skilled, qualified guy, worked at Google. He talks about the ideological echo chamber. What he's saying here is that essentially you have to support diversity, otherwise you'll be fired, which is the same thing in the finance industry. You have to parrot all the right agendas. And then he talks about the decline of competency if you focus on diversity for the sake of it. And then the second paragraph is quite important because, right, as I say, I'm part of the millennial generation, and we all know what it's like dealing with the baby boomer generation, the older generations. I would say typically people over the age of 50 or maybe over the age of 40 sometimes. They are completely detached. They are completely detached from the reality that most men are dealing with. They experience a much softer version of feminism, of liberalism, of whatever the woke ideology is now. They experience a much softer version of it. The economy was much more affordable to people on normal incomes. You could buy a house, have a family on even 1 to 2 incomes. You could raise kids in an environment that wasn't completely screwed up. You could get a decent paying job that was relatively stable. And this is what the second paragraph is putting. Older men with tacit knowledge either retire or are pushed out, right? So they've made enough money, typically in the finance industry, to retire early, right? The burden falls on young men, right? Lower performing young men angry at the toxic mix of affirmative action hurting their chances of admission to a good school and credentialism, right? They're turning their backs on college and white collar work. So in America, there's a bit of a trend there where men are seeing that there is a bias against them when it comes to corporate office roles. So they learn a trade. They learn plumbing, electrician, this high-powered cleaning type of roles that they can do and basically become self-employed, work in construction, maybe have a side hustle and do some kind of manual labor at the same time. That is a much more preferable option for many men. And even though I'm a career coach and I'm helping people who want to work in office roles, who want to work in finance or other top roles, they are dealing with a very difficult set of circumstances. And that's partly why I'm here, to try to help people. But I understand why people are kind of disillusioned, and particularly a lot of young men or men in general are kind of disillusioned with the work environment. And this is it. You know, you see this guy at Google said this. I think he either got fired or was kind of pushed to leave the company. And, you know, it's not going to end well. You shouldn't have a society that is this rigged against men, that is this... Got to be careful what you say. So you shouldn't have a system that is this rigged against men and that is going to backfire through collapsing systems and to perhaps, you know, people reacting quite negatively to it. In this section of the article, we can see that it tries to explain what happens ultimately to men who are working in this type of hostile work environment. Firstly, either they collaborate and just parrot the right narratives. They're going to pretend to be a feminist, a liberal, supporting whichever of the latest narratives is going on in the country right now. Or, but quite simply, they'll coast, right? Which is this mentioned here, right? So what they'll do is they'll say, okay, I'm working in an environment, meritocracy doesn't pay off, working hard doesn't pay off, you're not going to climb the corporate ladder on the basis of competency, so I'll just coast, I'll just chill, I'll just work slightly harder than the worst individual on the team, because if I work hard, I'm not going to get paid more. If I put in more effort, I'm not going to get promoted quicker. It's about sucking up to the right people. It's about parroting feminist, progressive, liberal narratives. So they'll just put in less effort. And that's what you do see in the finance industry and many other industries, right? So it says here, the combination of new employees who are hired for diversity's sake and not competence, and the declining engagement of highly competent people sets the stage for failure at an increasing frequency and magnitude. And what is it trying to say here? It's saying, look, right, if you're going to demotivate your most skilled, competent employees because they're toxic, they're men, they're whatever, negative, they're the best quality workers, but we're going to say they're the worst quality people, and you're going to elevate the worst quality people to the highest level on the basis of equality, you're going to have complete failures, complete inefficiencies. And the truth is, if you work in finance or any major corporate firm, you would think it'd be this super efficient, well-oiled machine, right? And you're a cog in the machine, but it's a very efficient system. Major corporations have so much bloat in terms of their processes. You're going through layers and layers and layers and layers and layers of bureaucracy. You're dealing with highly inefficient teams, highly inefficient people. But it gets ignored because partly it's the diversity initiative. Partly, if just no one's really looking at this objectively, how can we get work done in the most efficient way possible? They're not really focused on that. That's like a secondary thing. Pushing the agendas are more important, and hiring people who support the right agendas is more important than actually getting the work done quickly, efficiently, and then people living their lives. It's a completely bizarre, inefficient system. Now, this article finishes up with saying the path of least resistance will effectively be a reduction of quality of life. And every person who lives in the West, even if you're at the higher income levels, you've noticed that reduction in quality, right? When you go to the airport, when you get on the train, when you go to the gym and see the way how uncivilized things are, when you go to the grocery store, when you get things delivered, when you hire a service, everything is lowering in quality, right? So you just saw that video. I went through in a lot of detail, the bridge collapsing, potentially due to DEI, other potential issues due to DEI. I went through the fact that Morgan Stanley and other major finance firms, they're focused on whether you have the particular, if you're a woman, there's all these particular benefits that would benefit you, but if you're a man, that doesn't really exist. There's specific targets around 40% for women in senior management roles, nothing like that for men. DEI doesn't really benefit Asian men or white men in particular, or straight men in general. It's focused on being quite biased to, people who are non-conservative, people from like the woke crowd, things like that. And in general, it's quite negative for you if you are a man. So there's the conclusion there. I think you should just think about that when you are entering the work environment and being realistic about the kind of biases you might have to deal with. And as a career coach, that's really what I'm here to help you do, get an honest answer about the reality you're dealing with. So thanks for listening. Leave a comment below if you have any questions. There are 2 recommended videos on your screen right now, a free ebook in the description, and I'll see you next time.